afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. I am Persis Driver, and along with Artemis Javanshir, we are the co-chairs of FEZANA's Religion Education Committee. It is an absolute honor to welcome you to this year's Khorshed Jungalwala lecture with our esteemed speaker, Dr. Paulina Niechciał. This lecture is a forum dedicated to celebrating scholarship, leadership, and service within our global Zoroastrian community. This lecture series stands as a tribute to Khorshed Jungalwala's remarkable vision, one that championed education, upliftment, and empowerment of women as central to the vitality of our faith and future. Across generations, Zoroastrian women have carried the faith forward, often quietly, often against challenges, and always with deep devotion. Their work has never been easy, balancing tradition with change, faith with modern life, leadership with humility. All of this requires courage. Yet, in communities across the United States and around the world, women are transforming what it means to live and lead within this ancient faith. They remind us that the true power of religion lies not just in preserving what was, but in renewing it for what can be. I would like to invite Farzeen Patel, a psychotherapist and life coach in New York, who has represented Zoroastrianism in interfaith, academic, and leadership contexts. Who better to introduce us to the legacy of this lecture today than the daughter of Khorshed Jungalwala herself, who has been devoted to keeping her mother's legacy alive by sharing stories of her mother's contributions and introducing the inspiring speakers of this lecture series. I am so excited that Farzeen is here today to give us this introduction and to remind us of the power of collective action through a new and exciting idea for Zoroastrian women globally. Farzeen, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Persis. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Persis and Artemis, for inviting me to commemorate the 19th year when FEZANA instituted the Khorshed Jungalwala lecture series. The lecture series was established in 2006 by FEZANA to honor Khorshed's commitment to continue furthering Zoroastrian identity through education, preservation, and scholarship. It's a profound privilege to present the lecture series in honor of my mother, a distinguished leader, a pioneering voice, and a woman who exemplified what it meant to live a Zarathustri life with purpose and courage. This morning, we are honored to welcome Professor Paulina Niechciał, who will reflect on the role of Zarathustri women in the 21st century. Growing up as her daughter, I witnessed something remarkable that I didn't fully understand until I was older. I saw a woman who embodied the Zarathustri principles of good thoughts, good words, good deeds, not as abstract concepts, but as a living practice. She moved through the world with a quiet certainty that came from our ancient faith, a belief in the equality of all souls, in the power of education and discerning wisdom, and in our responsibility to leave the world a better place than what we found it. My mother came of age in an era when women's voices in community leadership were not just uncommon, they were dismissed. Yet she persisted, she led, and more importantly, she opened doors and held them open for countless others who followed, both men and women. Drawing strength from our Zarathustri heritage, which has always honored the wisdom and contributions of women, she showed that tradition and progress were not needing to be opposing forces. What strikes me most profoundly about her legacy wasn't just her organizational achievements, but her community work, though they were considerable. It was the ripple effect of her essence. Women, both young and her contemporaries across North America and beyond, saw her as a reflection of their own possibilities. She mentored young women and men who went on to mentor others. She encouraged women who had been told, remain quiet, to speak their truths instead. She created space and rooms where there had been none before, guided by the Zarathustra principle that knowledge and leadership are divine gifts meant to be shared. I recall the phone calls, letters, and emails from women she had taught, guided by the simply spoken and the gatherings at conferences where she was. They would tell me how a single conversation with her changed the trajectory of their lives, how her encouragement gave them courage to take on leadership roles, to start initiatives, to believe they belonged in spaces that historically excluded them. This lecture series exists because her impact didn't end with her own work. It multiplied. It continues to multiply. And every Zarathustra woman who leads today, every woman who has found her voice in our community stands on the shoulders of pioneers just like my mother and the many others that are out there, who refused to accept limitations, who understood that their success was never just about themselves. It was about lighting the path for others. So as we gather for the 19th Khorshed Jungalwala lecture, we're not just honoring a woman's legacy and achievements, we're celebrating a legacy of empowerment rooted in our ancient faith's recognition of equality, of possibility, and the righteous act of living the principles rather than just reciting them. We're acknowledging that when one woman succeeds in embodying Zarathustra values through action, she creates possibility for countless others. My mother taught me many things, but perhaps the most important thing was this: faith without action is incomplete. You can honor tradition while creating change. You can be rooted in our heritage without reaching towards new horizons, You can be devoted to family while still serving your community. She embodied all of those things, and in doing so, she showed an entire generation of Zarathustra women and women beyond our community that they could too. In line with the spirit of today's lecture, I am privileged and honored to announce that a new initiative is underway to expand Zasha. Originally established by Zerbanu Gifford at the 2022 World Zoroastrian Congress, and further supported by women who attended a women's retreat this past July in the UK. Zasha stands for the Zoroastrian Alliance for Sisterhood and Humanitarian Advancement. Zasha will serve as a powerful convergence point for Zoroastrian women across generations and geographies to connect, collaborate, empower, advocate, and co-create. As an initiative dedicated to fostering visionary female leadership, Zasha embodies exactly what my mother believed in: that when women come together in a common purpose rooted in our shared values, we don't just support one another, we transform an entire community. This platform ensures that our legacy of mentorship, empowerment, and purposeful action continue to grow and reach Zarathustra women wherever they may be. So I would encourage women worldwide who are listening to this talk to go to our Zasha website and share information about themselves and their potential contributions into this global initiative. And you can get more details by going to that website is Zasha, ZASHA.info. Thank you for being here to honor her memory and to carry her vision forward. I know she would be deeply moved by this gathering, and I carry her with me as a light that continues to illuminate a path forward. Mom, this is for you and every daughter who's watching here today. If my mom was here with us now, she'd probably check in with everyone and make sure that you have a good cup of lili chai and all your biscuits and batasa. So please get comfortable, get your tea and biscuits, and let's get started.
Thank you, Farzin, for that. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to call Paulina a friend and an honor to introduce her today. Paulina Niechciał is an assistant professor in the Center for Comparative Civilization Studies at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland. She holds a master's degree in ethnology and in Iranian studies and a doctorate in sociology earned with a dissertation based on field research in Iran, which examined the processes of constructing the collective identity of contemporary Zoroastrians in Tehran. She also studied Persian language and literature at the International Center for Persian Studies at the University of Tehran in Iran and was a visiting professor at Utica University, the University of Rochester, and the Academy of Sciences in Tajikistan. She was the recipient of a scholarship of the Polish Minister of Science and Higher Education for outstanding young scholars. Her academic pursuits are centered on the study of minorities and identity, anthropology and sociology of religion, enriched over time by interest in diaspora and gender studies. She is interested in contemporary cultures of Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, and also acquired an experience of a translator and interpreter of Persian and Dari. She's the author of many articles published in academic journals, book chapters, and the book Zoroastrian Minority in Modern Tehran on Collective Identity in the Context of Shia Domination, published in Polish in 2013. She also appreciates participating in various outreach projects to popularize academic knowledge. In 2019, as a recipient of the Khorshed Foundation's Fellowship and hosted by Department of Central Eurasian Studies at the Indiana University in Bloomington, she conducted fieldwork within her research project, Lived Religion in the Context of Migration, the case of Zoroastrian women in the USA that resulted in her recent book entitled Zoroastrian Women in the United States of America, Practicing Lived Zoroastrianism in a Diaspora. Recently, she was a visiting scholar at the Department of Anthropology of the SUNY University in Buffalo, conducting research among women of Polish American descent. Her recently published book is truly insightful and an enlightening read. We will place the link to purchase it through FEZANA in the chat shortly. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished speaker, Ms. Paulina Niechciał. Paulina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Artemis, for introduction, and Farzin, thank you so much for this touching introduction to our meeting today. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. I see many friendly faces, so really great to see you today. This is really an honor to talk about such an exciting topic as women in modern Zoroastrianism and how women actively transform the religion and Zoroastrian communities. Today's talk is based on what I present in the book Artemis mentioned about, but I also want to share some observations that are not included in the book. But before we start, I want to say that writing this book wouldn't be possible, first of all, without the support of my home institution, Jagiellonian University in Kraków, a fellowship granted by Kościuszko Foundation, and the support of Professor Jamshid Choksi from Indiana University in Bloomington that hosted me during the research. But also, I have to say that, of course, it wouldn't be possible without contribution and support of so many great Zoroastrian women who I met during the research and with whom I am still a friend today, and I hope we will be still in touch. Of course, I'm also very grateful to FEZANA Religion Education Committee for all the support and organizing this event today. So thank you so much. Let me share my presentation.
No, Paulina. Okay, there you go. We see it.
Okay, so that's probably a a delay. Okay. So today I'm going to introduce I'm not going to introduce the field research itself, because actually the research I conducted for the book, I had an honor to talk about it about 2 years ago. I was invited by FEZANA Religion Education Committee, and the video is still available on the website of the committee. So if you didn't watch it, you're very welcome to watch it. So I'm not going to introduce the research itself. My plan for today is that I will start with some historical background and then discuss what is my focus, so the transformative impact of Zoroastrian women. And at the end, I hope you have some questions and maybe comments. So I would be really interested in comments from the audience. So my experience with Zoroastrianism started with the research I conducted in 2008 in Iran. And my main focus was the community of Tehran and how Zoroastrians maintained their identity in the context of a Shia-dominated country. I must say that my very first encounter with Zoroastrianism was from a female's perspective, because actually, as I mentioned in the book also, the first Zoroastrian I have ever met was a woman introduced to me by one of the professors of my university, who had met her on her trip to Tehran, and I was very excited that I was able to meet a real Zoroastrian. After some time, I realized that it is very difficult to understand Zoroastrianism without using what we could call a gender lens. And I found the topic of women in this religion very important because of the significant transformation we have observed in this ancient religion recently. And the transformation actually impacted by women, not seen in earlier centuries, but very visible now in what's going on in the Zoroastrian communities all over the world, actually. So let's start with drawing some background. We must recognize that Zoroastrian religion emerged within patriarchal culture of ancient Iranian peoples and later took root in the male-dominated society of India, where Zoroastrians established themselves and the Parsi community began to flourish. Okay, I cannot. Do you still? Oh, okay. I hope you can see another picture. Yes. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's good. There is a delay, so but I hope it's going to be smooth. So ancient Zoroastrian texts, such as the Gathas, the most important texts of Zoroastrianism, granted moral and religious agency to both men and women. And this is very important today. This is something that gives modern women the legitimization of their search for equal rights and justification for their activism. Women claim and believe that their religion provides them a basis for seeking equality, and they draw us on such examples as Porochista. You see her modern image, how a modern artist actually imagines she may have looked like on the slide. So the mythological youngest daughter of Zoroaster. On the occasion of her marriage, Zoroaster is believed to have spoken of her noble mind, recognizing women in their role as thinkers and giving them the freedom to choose their spouse. So Zoroaster is perceived today as the one who did not want to impose his opinion on his daughter and gave her, a chance to choose by herself. So this is very important. This is something that modern women get inspired by. However, historically, women were expected to obey male authority, focus on domestic roles, and had limited participation in public rituals. Purity laws reinforced gender boundaries and excluded women from priesthood. Modernity brought gradual reforms that included access to education for girls, legal changes, and erosion of discriminative practices. So generally, the late 19th and early 20th centuries brought a significant change for women. The societies of India and Iran transformed in times when actually women from different parts of the world fought for their rights and greater recognition in their societies. So we can recall emancipation movements in the United States. We can think about women in my native country, Poland, who gained voting rights in 1918. And similarly, Zoroastrian women began to gain social and economic independence. So let's see how it occurred in both in India and Iran, as it provides a direct basis for more current changes and women's activism. So it is important to talk about these two countries separately, and that's what I'm going to do, as over centuries cultural and political changes shaped the status of women differently in Iran and among Parsis in India. So let's start with India, because some reforms appeared earlier in India than in Iran. So historically, Parsi women in India were largely restricted to domestic roles, excluded from priesthood and public religious life, and the religious participation was limited to household rituals and storytelling traditions. They were subject to strict purity laws, including isolation during menstruation and childbirth. It seems actually that Zoroastrian priests in India were so afraid of losing the religious customs brought from native Iran to the new location that they became very restrictive about some things, because they wanted to keep what was brought from Iran. So also, practices such as polygyny and child marriage persisted well into the 19th century. Mitra Sharafi, in the book, you can see the cover here, so the book on Parsi legal culture actually indicates that gender was a central side of conflict between English and Parsi legal values. However, as I said, modernity brought significant changes in India also. Under British colonial influence, Parsis embraced Western education and legal reforms. The Parsi Marriage and Divorce Acts of 1865 and 1933 marked milestones such as banning polygyny, granting women equal grounds for divorce. You see a few pictures, a couple of historical pictures of Parsi schools. So actually, access to education for Parsi girls marked a turning point in the modernization of Zoroastrian communities in India. So this is very important. In the mid-19th century, the first schools for Parsi girls were established. Often they were funded by wealthy Parsi philanthropists such as Sir Jamsetji Jijiboy. Initially, in fact, families were reluctant to send girls to schools, fearing that sending girls outside the home would challenge traditional gender roles. However, over time, education became widely accepted, and Parsi women achieved the highest literacy rates among Indian communities. And this is very important also for modern women to remember about this achievement. And I know that they are really proud of what happened. This access to schooling not only improved the literacy of women, but also opened doors to higher education and professional careers, enabling women to participate in public life and expanding their social roles. And many Zoroastrian women in the 20th century entered public life, arts, and philanthropy. It was a key factor in the eroding of patriarchal norms and the fostering of reforms that shaped the modern identity of Zoroastrian women. One of my interviewees, a first-generation immigrant from India, a lady in her 50s, who, while growing up in India, attended a school bearing the name of the famous Parsi philanthropist, industrialist Jamsetji Nusserwanji Tata. Actually, she told me that this experience of being a student in such a school made her, and I quote, a strong, independent thinking woman, end of quote. And interestingly, because actually I asked my interviewers to show me pictures of places significant to them, and she also chose the picture of the school. And also in some other interviews, education was mentioned as an important life experience, something that actually shaped the identity of women. Of course, despite these advances, some patriarchal norms in the Zoroastrian community in India persisted, and the priesthood remained accessible to male only. Women who married outside the community faced exclusion from religious spaces and communal benefits, while men in similar situations retained.
Paulina, one moment. I think you're muted.
Paulina, please
Mhm.
unmute yourself. Start from where women were excluded.
Okay. So women excluded, women who married outside of the community, and men in similar situations retained their rights. So this gender double standard became a focal point of activism in the late 20th century, with organizations like the Association of Intermarried Zoroastrians campaigning for equality. Today, the debates about intermarriage and conversion as well, they continue to shape community boundaries. The discussion pops up from time to time, also in media, as you see on the examples I'm presenting here. And what is important in the discussions is that women are participating. If we think about the discussions over the reforms in the Parsi community that took place in the 19th century, even if the actually women's rights were discussed and issues that were related to a women's situation, women were absent. And today they are taking part in those discussions. I want to add that such changes were also visible in what Professor John Hinnels called the Old Parsi diaspora. So East Africa, Hong Kong, and other colonial outposts where Parsis have settled under British rule. So his book on the Zoroastrian diaspora describes that Zoroastrian women initially reproduced traditional roles in those locations, but gradually gained influence through education and social work. By the mid-20th century, they were voting in local associations and even holding leadership positions. Of course, although of course some ritual restrictions were maintained. Let's move to Iran now. In Islamic Iran, Zoroastrian women faced a double marginalization, we could say, because they were both members of a minority and women. However, the transformation of their position began at the turn of the 20th century. Contacts with Parsis, Western influences, and general transformations of Iranian society triggered reforms. So also, it also included the access to education. You see examples of Zoroastrian schools for girls. So modern girls' schools were established in Yazd, Kerman, and then in Tehran, removing restrictions on female education. And actually, the education was conducted in a very modern style from the beginning. Practices such as polygyny and child marriage gradually disappeared, and attitudes toward purity laws also softened, reducing the isolation of menstruating women. Under the Pahlavi dynasty, so 1925 till the Islamic Revolution, of 1979, state policies promoting pre-Islamic heritage and gender reforms improved the public presence of women. Women gained voting rights in Iran in 1963, and in that period, Zoroastrian women received an opportunity to hold positions in Zoroastrian community councils called anjumans. They could also vote within those organizations. And organizations like Anjuman Zanon Zartoshtiye Tehran, you see their website on the right side. So the Zoroastrian Women Association in Tehran advocated gender equality, although their focus shifted a bit after the Islamic Revolution towards more traditional picture of women's role, because it was, to fit the expectations of the new government after the revolution. Anjuman Mobedan Tehran, so the Tehran Priest Council, the most important organization for Zoroastrian priests, actually included laymen and women from priestly families in its election after the Islamic Revolution. At that time, it was due to a shortage of practicing male priests, but it happened that women actually became included. Post-revolutionary Iran restored Islamic norms, enforcing mandatory veiling also for minorities and limiting women's access to certain professions. Zoroastrian women, as members of a recognized religious minority, also faced discrimination in terms of legal restrictions on interfaith marriage, inheritance, and political participation. Facing such restrictions, the community responded by revitalizing its identity. So this was actually the focus of my research in 2008. And during my research, I met very active Zoroastrian women, very active in the community. Among my interviewees was a teacher of the Dari language and other educators, women active in Zoroastrian anjumans, women engaged in organizing community events, so all of them involved in maintaining Zoroastrian identity. Finally, the community gave women partial access to religious structures. So you see on the pictures, women serving as mobetyars, as priest assistants. Since 2011, women trained in religious matters during specially designed classes, hirbodi classes, have been allowed to become mobetyars, so priest assistants. So we could call it a groundbreaking step in the history of Zoroastrian religion. Today, Zoroastrian leaders in Iran officially promote gender equality as a core value of the religion, but of course, to some extent, traditional binary gender norms persist. At one of my visits to Iran, I participated in the community celebration of Jashna Esfandgan, which takes place at the end of the Zoroastrian year. And it is identified with Spenta Armaiti. I analyzed the construction of femininity, so attributes, behaviors, and roles associated with women. Femininity visible in the modern Zoroastrian discourse connected to this occasion. This is an interesting example. I also write about it in my book. So today, Zoroastrian communities throughout the country, through a variety of social events, celebrate this day as Women's and Mother's Day. And even I heard they celebrate it as a counterpart of to Valentine's Day. So Spenta Armaiti is presented as a mother and guardian of the earth, characterized by fertility, kindness, devotion, humility, love, purity, righteous thoughts, and belief in God. In the context of Esfandgan, women have been associated with similar characteristics as Spenta Armaiti. And a celebration has been described as devoted to women of good deeds and as an occasion to thank wives and mothers for their efforts. So in fact, to an extent, it reproduces traditional gender roles ascribed to men and women. So we see that the tensions between egalitarian ideas and patriarchal patterns are visible, but this does not stop women from expanding their roles in education, community leadership, and ritual life to the extent it is possible in the Islamic Republic of Iran, of course. So this is a short introduction to the situation in Iran and in India, how it's changed, and let's go to the U.S. and North America more generally speaking. So of course, Zoroastrians migrated to other parts of the world too, but North America and especially the United States of America is home to the biggest population of Zoroastrians nowadays. So this is why it's the focus of my research. So migration to North America in the second half of the 20th century transformed the role of Zoroastrian women. The diaspora context, of course, opened new opportunities, and multicultural environment encouraged women to assume leadership roles and redefine religious practices. But of course, this would not be possible without the transformation in the old countries that I just discussed. Many of my Parsi interviewees, women in their 50s, 60s, and older, came to North America as wives in arranged marriages. So sometimes it is a practice seen as undermining women's autonomy and agency in their decisions. However, the American context pushed all women to develop their own career choices and actively engaged in community matters. Migration to North America created a setting in which Zoroastrians needed new strategies to preserve identity. Women became central to the process of community building, and some of these women, you know, from the Zasha website, from Zasha activities, you can read about them on the Zasha website. Women serve on boards or even as presidents of Zoroastrian organizations, editors of community journals, including the influential FEZANA journal. I saw today we have in the audience Roshan Rivetna, Dolly Dastur, and other women connected to FEZANA journal. So women contribute to development of Zoroastrianism in a new context by organizing community events, teaching children, managing associations, and developing educational initiatives such as Sunday schools. And their involvement extends beyond administration of religious education, actually to shaping the education for younger generations, ensuring the transmission of heritage in a pluralistic society. One example, of course, is the FEZANA Religion Committee, a religion education committee to whom I owe my invitation to today's lecture. So I had a great honor of seeing how they work when they invited me to a meeting that took place during the FEZANA annual general meeting in Chicago in 2024. So this is a feminized environment that does a lot for Zoroastrian education and what is important for building bridges between Iranians and Parsis in the field of education, which is a very important achievement in the diaspora. I want to share with you the comparison of women's participation in World Zoroastrian Congresses. I think it is a very interesting illustration of the growth of public engagement of women. So the committee that prepared the Third Congress in Bombay in 1978 had 43 members, including only 8 women. And the situation was completely different in New York City in 2022, when women made up about half of the committee. Also, I want to show you another picture I took during the Congress in New York City. So it shows 3 women serving as mobetyars in North America. So you see, some women cross the gendered boundaries traditionally applied to religious activities, and in the US and Canada now serve as mobetyars trained locally or through online courses. Also, there is a few people trained in Iran who migrated to the US. So this development started in Iran, as I mentioned. And it challenges centuries-old restrictions and symbolizes a shift toward gender inclusion. Actually, I want to add that yesterday evening, I received a text message from Bakhtavar Desai, the leader of Zoroastrian Association of Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana. And she texted me that she will not be able to join the lecture today because she and her husband is a priest, they are conducting classes for young people who are going to be mobetyars. So this is a great achievement because, you know, she's a Zoroastrian woman conducting such an important class on such an important level. And she also mentioned that among 5 people in the area who want to become mobetyars, there are 3 women. So more than half of the students in the group. So women often take the lead in negotiating changes such as the disappearance of social taboos and the recognition of children of mixed marriages as Zoroastrians as well, which is also important topic in the diaspora. So balancing tradition with modern realities. This is a picture taken from a Gen Z report that was released in 2023. So it shows high rates of intermarriage, especially visible in the diaspora. This is something that actually have normalized inclusive practices. And traditionally, of course, Zoroastrian identity was hereditary, and mixed marriages challenge it by introducing partners and children from outside the faith. In North America, the growing number of Zoroastrians marry non-Zoroastrians, and most local communities now accept children of such unions as Zoroastrians. This shift moves Zoroastrianism from an ethnic-based identity toward a more inclusive, choice-based model. It should be noted that according to the Gen Z report, women were more likely than men to accept both intermarried men and intermarried women, and also accept their children into the community. According to my observations, women often lead negotiations on identity in mixed households, reinforcing their role as agents of transformation. Mixed marriages foster hybrid identities where Zoroastrian values such as Asha and good thoughts, words, and deeds are integrated with other ethical systems. This hybridization ensures continuity of core principles while allowing cultural diversity, which makes Zoroastrianism relevant in multicultural societies. Modern contexts foster creativity, and innovations align Zoroastrianism with what we could call Western spiritual trends that emphasize personal experience, a personal path of spiritual development, and inclusivity. Many of my interviewees approach prayers as tools for inner peace and mindfulness. Practices such as meditation and yoga are combined with Zoroastrian prayers, reframing ancient principles as ethical and spiritual guides for personal growth. In the pictures from my fieldwork that have not been included in the book, you can see examples of how women creatively shape the space around themselves with objects that, as they explain, bring them inner peace, calm them, and give them spiritual fulfillment. Spirituality was actually a very important topic in many of the interviews. Women also introduced new formats of rituals that combine spiritual continuity with contemporary lifestyles. So let me give an interesting example of innovation here. So historically, Zoroastrian women maintained religious life through domestic rituals, often centered on the sofra. So you see the example of Zoroastrian sofra on the left side. You see something that is similar in Parsi culture on the right side. So sofra is a decorated cloth laid out for storytelling, prayers, and symbolic offerings. So these gatherings were intimate, gendered spaces where women transmitted religious knowledge informally outside the male-dominant temple environment. Women in the diaspora have reinterpreted this tradition to fit contemporary lifestyles. So you see the examples of women-centered retreats, workshops. They can be really small, they can be bigger events, but this is something that I would say now echoes the communal spirit of the Sofra, but expands its scope. So instead of a small domestic setting, retreats take place in nature or community centers, blending prayer with cultural education, meditation, and discussions on ethics and identity. The aesthetic incorporates Zoroastrian motifs and emphasizes beauty, symbolism, and shared experience. Such retreats reinterpret Zoroastrian values like Asha through interactive activities rather than traditional rigid liturgy. Spirituality, as I mentioned, something very important for Zoroastrian women, modern Zoroastrian women in North American context, can be actually very broadly interpreted. So one of my Iranian interviewees said that she was learning Persian calligraphy. This was something that connected her to poetry and art and the traditions of her native country. And she treated it as a part of her spiritual path. So she was developing her spirituality, her interest in religion, not necessarily through a religious, traditionally understood religious practice, but through what she called the spiritual practices. So calligraphy, like walks in nature or music, it can become a tool for expressing spirituality that does not separate women from their Zoroastrian heritage, but we could say it complements it. As an interesting example of the transformation of modern Zoroastrianism, I want to bring a more personal example. I know that today in the audience we also have Mani Rao, my very good friend from the Parsi community of Chicago. I'm sure many of you have heard of her. So what she does is the revival and reinterpretation of monajats, Zoroastrian devotional songs. Traditionally, monajats were sung by women in domestic settings. So, as I said, women were excluded from public rituals very often, from participation in public Zoroastrianism. So they found their own ways to practice, usually in domestic spaces, as sofra, mushkil asan rituals, and also monajats. So traditionally, singing monajats was an unofficial female activity, similar to devotional sofra. So this is something, as I said, compensated women for their lack of public activity and limited access to rituals. Mani Rao turned the songs into her individual form of spiritual expression, blending prayer with music and creativity, and she performs monajats at communal gatherings. And I think this is very important because this is something that was more private, more bound to domestic space, where women were performing their religious practices, and now it went public. And look at the picture on the left side. This was a meeting during the COVID-19 pandemic. Online meeting, you can see the picture of Mani Rao and 3 priests. So when I saw this picture, I was like, her ancestors for sure didn't expect, that this will be the future of Zoroastrian women. So I think this is really, really amazing that those practices are now publicly recognized. When we talk about music, I also want to add that I saw the interest in traditional forms of music also growing among Zoroastrians in Iran. And I think this is worth mentioning because I have the impression that it is growing and it is something developed by women. I definitely see the difference compared to the research I conducted in 2008 and my subsequent visits. So as you can see on the picture, women performing publicly on stage, singing songs that were not public in the past. In Iran, I also saw public poetry performances by women very respected in the community. So another modern development and an example of strengthening presence of women in the public and their influence in the community. Female voices have been heard also in other fields of Zoroastrian culture. So there are, for example, female writers of Zoroastrian origin, such as Babsi Sitwa, Meher Pastanji, or Nergis Dalal. So women who give voice to other women, previously barely heard in literature. They use feminist and post-colonial lenses, highlighting marginalization of women, draw nuanced portraits of women's inner lives and relational complexities, and they discuss emotional, psychological conflicts faced by women in patriarchal settings. So very important also that the books are read not only within Zoroastrian community, of course, but they are recognized also outside of the community. This is something I found very interesting, observing what started, I would say started during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, on the internet. Many things started to be online more than earlier. So the presence of the youngest generation of women now actively introducing Zoroastrianism to others and publicly sharing their experiences, their thoughts with the audience. So just a few examples I found on the FEZANA Facebook website. I think this is very interesting to observe the youngest generation interested in religion, and among the youngest generation, women, girls being very active. So to sum up, by entering roles as artists and activists, educators and priest assistants, women challenge historical restrictions. They lead prayers, they conduct ceremonies, they design gender-neutral spaces for worship. Their efforts demonstrate that tradition can evolve without losing its essence, ensuring the survival of Zoroastrianism in a globalized world. And these changes reflect a shift from hierarchical, male-dominated structures to participatory models of religious and community life. So there are, of course, many more steps to take to consider how Zoroastrianism transforms. And what I showed today, what I showed in my book, is just one perspective. I wanted to highlight women's voices, voices that had not been largely heard in canonical texts of religion, and also earlier research. I believe that investigating women's experiences actually fills the gap and provides a more complete picture of lived religion. So today, Zoroastrian women are not only custodians of domestic rituals, but also active agents of religious innovation. They advocate for inclusivity, and although tensions remain between conservative and liberal interpretations, the North American experience I try to capture in my book demonstrates how migration and cultural adaptation can empower women and reshape an ancient tradition. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. And let me know if you have any questions or comments. I would be very interested.
Thank you, Paulina. Thank you. I'll let everybody soak that in for just a couple of seconds. I think this was a wonderful, wonderful way to begin thinking about this topic. And I think there's so many questions. There have been wonderful questions in the chat. I have been monitoring them, so I'm going to try and bring them in. And hopefully, we can have a lovely conversation as well. But first, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. What a wonderful.
Thank you so much for listening.
Of course. So, Paulina, maybe we can start with a question that was in the chat, and then I'll connect it to, some of the themes that are, popping out as we are listening, as we are learning through this. So let's go a little bit to the basics.
Okay, so many comments. So I had, of course, no chance to have a
No.
look at those. So you have to help me.
I will. But there was one question that really sort of popped out, and I thought we could start the conversation with that and then jump into the more complex ones as well. So there was a question in the chat that said, how do you, in your work, define women in the research, and what are the ages that various communities start to treat girls as women? Mainly the audience member is asking, as we think about the passage from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, are there different norms for children depending on their gender? How do you see
That's a very interesting question, but of course, in my research, I decided no matter of cultural norms, when girl ends and a woman starts, I had to obey the norms of ethical anthropological research. So I decided to talk to women who were already what's the legally? I'm not sure now for about the English word, legally adults. Is this, yeah. So actually, in fact, I spoke only with women who didn't need to have their parents' permission to participate in anthropological research of this kind. So for me, all of them were women. And also, if we talk about gender issues, my interviewees were people who identified themselves as women. So it wasn't me choosing, but I was asking if they want to participate in such a research and if they consider themselves women.
Yeah. So, continuing that line of thought, many of us, who grew up in different areas of the globe, right? India, Iran, North America, oftentimes, and in your book, you mentioned this, that in the old country, the proximity to markers of religion like Agyari, Atashkade, and to the larger Zoroastrian community, it often acted like a catalyst for women to remain connected and to practice their rituals, communal celebrations, ceremonies, and of course transform them with spirituality, as you were just explaining so beautifully as well. But on the other hand, you also mentioned that living in such close-knit communities, especially in big cities, had the opposite effect on a few women who often perceived kind of distancing themselves a little from the community as being cool. And I'm assuming the age factor plays a role here as well, right? So could you elaborate for us a little how living close to a larger Zoroastrian community in the diaspora might have affected generations of women?
That's very interesting question, because that's true that several women mentioned that when they, for example, grew up in Bombay, in very Parsi-dominated community environment, you know, the family, friends, most of them were Parsis. They felt it wasn't. They wanted to distance themselves from the community, and you know, it was, as you said, not cool to be a traditional Parsi. And also this may happen in the United States. So I also met a few young women who told me that, you know, growing up in several women actually used the word bubble. So growing up in a Zoroastrian bubble, my interviewees who mentioned were both Parsi and Iranian origin. So it doesn't matter actually. So one of them grew up in California, where there is many Iranian Zoroastrians. One of them grew up in Chicago, where there is a strong Parsi community, not that big, but still, and in a few other places. So actually, they said that it was very overwhelming, because growing up, they felt that there is a huge pressure on them to, you know, be good Zoroastrians and to socialize with Zoroastrians only. So, but also it depends. In fact, it of course it depends on you know, the personality and the family itself. So sometimes it's very difficult, you know, to give straight answers. But at the same time, being close to the Zoroastrian community, being a member of the Zoroastrian community, gives you a competence, gives you knowledge. That I observed that even if women went to college, university, and it was, you know, like a pause taken from being a community member, after some time, some of them came back. Especially having children is something that many women mentioned, that this is something that actually attracted them to the community life again. So growing up in the Zoroastrian bubble gave them competence and knowledge that they were able to come back, and they were able to pass the religion and the heritage to their children. Interesting case is when you grow up in the community where like in the area where there are no Zoroastrians or almost no Zoroastrians. So this is very interesting, and of course, usually you don't have an access to regular religious classes. Of course, now it's important. It's more easy than it was just a few years ago, because many things are online, accessible online. It wasn't the case a few years ago. So such women, I spoke with some of them, and they really like they felt they wanted to be a part of the community that wasn't there. But I would say that from my experience, that from my observations, that probably more important is the impact of the family than the community itself.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so if we were to kind of extrapolate and move from there, if thinking about the women who have moved within the diaspora, right? Did you notice, did you see differences in how Zoroastrianism was practiced by women who came perhaps from India versus those who came from Iran, and then whose daughters grew up in the United States? That dynamic seems really fascinating.
That was really fascinating for me too, because, as I mentioned, actually I was exposed to Iranian Zoroastrianism at the beginning. So I also learned a lot during the research about Parsi culture, which I didn't know that much about. So this was very interesting to observe the differences between Iranian and Parsi Zoroastrianism. But at the same time, again, I would say that not the community is uh, as important as individual families are for the understanding of Zoroastrianism. I remember speaking with one Iranian Zoroastrian who actually grew up in very Parsi dominated area, and actually because her family was not very religious, they were not very religious, so actually they didn't expose her to Zoroastrianism that much. So for her, Parsi style Zoroastrianism was something more recognizable because of the community influence. Then she grew up and she moved to another place, and then she actually got in touch with Iranian Zoroastrianism. So she actually this was eye-opening experience to her. But going back to your question, there is a very big difference between first generation immigrants and second generation immigrants. First of all, what was very interesting is the material side of religion, and heritage and identity. So usually homes of first generation immigrants are full of very different objects that actually like diasporic objects, we could say. So things that connect people to their homelands. The homelands they left. I didn't notice that the much materiality important in the houses of second generation immigrants in their lives. And definitely, the lifestyle and the time you have for practicing. Many women told me it is different when they grew up in the old countries and now they observe their children who are very busy with everything else than Zoroastrianism. Even if they, of course, even if they go to Zoroastrian classes, but not necessarily are very they have much time for Zoroastrian activities. Also, what is important is how people are connected to the old countries. So if you travel, if you have experience of living there, you have usually more knowledge, you know the rituals, you know the places, you know how Udvada looks like or Pirasabs. If you don't travel, you don't know those things. And this is an ethnic difference, I would say, because most of the Iranians I spoke with, the second generation women born here, they do not travel to Iran because of the political situation. So their connection is a bit different than the connection of Parsi women. Because even second generation, many women travel. And, the stories of having now Jot ceremony in the old country. Some of my interviewees had weddings in the old country, even though they were born and raised in the US. So for them, it was a bit weird experience sometimes. but they went there and did it. So this connection is very different if we think about ethnic differences. I'm not sure if I answered the question, because actually that's a very broad question. So just giving a few examples.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely right. And for those of us, again, talking about those generational differences, I have a daughter, and these are themes that we're constantly thinking about. Is it enough that we take my daughter back to India once every 2 years? Is that enough? And then that connection to the objects, oh, that's so real for so many of us, right? So no, that's perfect. But if we can narrow this down a little, right? I think one of the most fascinating, interesting, something that commands so much respect is the women Mombatiers in our community. And you talk a lot about that as well. Can you explain a little bit more why women were successful in being Mombatiers in Iran, and that experience as well, or what you might have learned from those conversations?
That's a very interesting topic. I must say that I was very excited when I heard for the first time that women became allowed to be Mombatiers. And sometimes if I talk about it, people are really surprised that, oh, it happened in Iran, which is, Islamic Republic, and women have no rights there. So how is it possible that they became priest assistants? So, of course, this is a religious minority that recognize religious minorities, Zoroastrians, that so they have at least some rights, and in the religious matters they can. Of course, this is debatable, but let's say they can do what is in their religion if it's not something that would actually be not good for Muslim environment. So actually what happened in Iran, I think that first of all, it is something that we call gender queue or gender line. So, male go first, and then if there are not enough men, there is space for women to do something. So, but that's true. And that's what happened, as I said, just at the beginning, just after the revolution. Before the revolution, there were almost no priests. The group was really small. So, as I said, Concussion Mobadan had to allow lay people to participate because there were no priests. After the revolution, as I said, the revitalization of identity, a bit more people interested in becoming Mobeds, but still not enough. So the space for women to take the roles. But also, I believe this is something that is important for Zoroastrian identity, because being a minority in Islamic country, they don't want to assimilate. They want to show that they are different than the dominant Muslim community. So showing that gender equality is important value in our religion is something important. Showing that we treat women differently than Islam is very important. So, giving women the space to be involved in religious structures, I think this is also something to show that we are different than the dominant community. In India, there is still many male priests. The community is, I would say, a bit, not all, but partly, is still more conservative, more traditional. And in North America, there are influences of both sides. So it is more complicated in North America, because it seems that the North American Mobile Council is more traditional in their view of what female Mobadiers can do or cannot do than Iranian.
But then when you're done, press it again.
I want to speak.
can I? Okay, I will finish and yeah. So the situation here is more complicated, of course. You have more sometimes conflicting views, but still there are women who are all either those who became Mobeteurs through Mobets Council in North American Mobets Council, but also those who were initiated as Mobeteurs in Iran. So this is not possible in India, but it's possible in Iran. Also, during the pandemic, it became possible to become a Mobetior through online courses. So this online connection with Iran also made a huge improvement. So very different experiences. You asked also about experiences. So I think this would be very interesting research for the future, actually. I spoke with a few Mobetiors. I hope that maybe in the future I will have a chance to speak with more of them. There will be more of them too. As I said, the group is growing. So very different experiences because it depends on the community they are in. The communities in North America are also different, are also, more liberal, more conservative, more Parsi dominated, more Iranian dominated. So what are the local experiences of women? It also depends on where they actually live.
Lovely. So, a couple of other questions in the chat that I'd like to bring up right now. One specific one was on public engagement of women. So we're talking about religious engagement in these many different ways, but one of our participants also asked if Zoroastrian women in Iran participated in protests on women's wailing or the Arab Spring Revolution. Have they contributed to LGBTQ plus acceptance and social change? That the role of women in these societal conversations, is that something that you might be able to shed some light on as well?
Oh, this is interesting question. Thank you for that. But if we think about, the like inclusivity and rights of LGBTQ plus community, of course, those are not topic discussed in Iran. This is something that you cannot just, go and support publicly. Also, if we talk about, the protests that actually started after that of Mahsa Jina Amini. So, of course, many people protested, but as far as I know, Zoroastrians were quite careful because, they are a minority. So their situation is not equal to the situation of Muslims. So, they like participation in such events, such protests would be even more dangerous for them. So yeah.
Lovely. No, thank you for that.
So I'm not saying that people do not support this or that. I'm saying about, because the question was about the public engagement. So it is very difficult more difficult for Zoroastrians, for minorities than for Muslims.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I don't think we can have this conversation without, addressing one more question, which is that in the diaspora, in our context, where interfaith marriage is increasingly common, do you see that shaping the religious continuity or the transformation of Zoroastrian practices and how women participate in these practices? I think that's a very critical question for so many individuals within our community today.
Yeah, I know that there is a fear that, allowing intermarriages would contribute to the death of Zoroastrianism. But I do not agree. I spoke with women who married outside of the community, and I would say that actually. So those, of course, I spoke with women who claimed to be Zoroastrians, right? So those who wanted to keep the tradition alive. So those women who wanted to keep the tradition alive, but married out of the community, they really wanted to keep this heritage. They married different women I spoke with married different people of different ethnic and religious background, but usually they try, to balance the mixed heritage, and they try to keep the Zoroastrian heritage ongoing. Of course, it is different than if you have both parents of Zoroastrian origin. But as I said, it depends on individual families also to what extent you want to keep the religion alive. So women I spoke with were really devoted to passing on Zoroastrianism. They also wanted to give space to their husbands. I remember one of them told me that she was not imposing Zoroastrianism that much for first a few years of her child's life. But after some time, she was, okay, my husband already had his chance. He didn't use it. So now I'm starting, to so and I know that she's really engaged, and that her child is going to have her Navjot and stuff. So usually women are really interested in passing on the heritage, but I think what is important is also how the community and how the family reacts to that. Because I also met someone who it was actually a sad story, because it was a story of someone who, like a Parsi family, and their daughter married out of the community, and they didn't want to, have much to do with her anymore. So I don't think, after being so disappointed with the Zoroastrian community, I don't think she would be willing, her children to be a part of the community. But of course, it is different in the cases where the family is supportive, is acceptive, and the community, of course. So I wouldn't, I don't have fear that mixed marriages will destroy Zoroastrianism. Of course, Zoroastrianism will change, but culture, religion is dynamic, is changing all the time. There is like no stable culture, no stable religion. So this is inevitable that the change is coming, but at the same time, it's not something that can destroy religion. Actually, it can contribute, to its development.
Wonderful. I think that was the most uplifting, wonderfully positive way. We are at a 1.5 hour mark. So keeping in the essence of time and, respecting everyone's time. Paulina, I have to thank you so deeply, so truly and today, just for allowing us all to gather here in the spirit of Khorshed Jungalwala, as we honor all the women you talk about, as we honor you, Farzeen, everyone, and the resilience of women that continues to shape the soul and the future of our community. So thank you, Paulina. I'm going to hand it over to Artemis right now. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being such a wonderful friend. And we hope to keep calling you more and more, right? These are such wonderful conversations.
With pleasure. It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. On behalf of Persis and myself, we would like to thank all of you for attending the 2025 Khorshed Jungalwala Memorial Lecture. Our heartfelt thanks go to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Paulina Niechciał, for her enlightening and enjoyable presentation, and to Ms. Farzeen Patel for sharing such meaningful reflections on her mother, Khorshed Jungalwala, and her inspiring legacy. The next fireside chat, where our youth engage in deep and meaningful conversations with inspiring community members, will focus on 3 contemporary women, leaders in North America, continuing the same theme as today. So look out for the dates. Thank you all once again for being part of this special event. Have a good day and see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.